Good evening and welcome to this Committee of the Whole meeting for Monday, October 5th, 2020. We'll start off tonight's meeting with a library trustee interview, and council has requested that anytime a new library board member is nominated, that they have the opportunity to interview prior to making the selection at the city council meeting. So opening up, Mr. Green, thank you so much for coming tonight. It's good to have you. Can you hear us all right? Oh, and we have you muted, so you might need to unmute. And then try again when you're ready. Yes. Oh. Okay, can you try again, sir? Can you hear us still?
Pardon me?
Okay, yes, we have you fine. So thank you. I'll open it up. Council had the opportunity to look in at his general application and his questionnaire for the library board position. So I'd open it up if council has any specific questions for Mr. Green.
I had the pleasure of interviewing Reg last week for this position, and I wouldn't mind, Reg, if you'd tell us a little bit about your experience with other boards and why you feel you can contribute to the library board. Can you hear me? I don't.
Yes. The other boards that come to mind off the top of my head that are here locally that I've participated in, at the university, there were a range of committees and boards that I served on. One that led to being on a similar board for Cedar Falls was the Public Art and Architecture Board committee at the university. And then I served for a while on the Cedar Falls Public Art Committee, and enjoyed that experience as well. It was a little bit different than the university experience, but that was a great opportunity. Over the years, I've done a range of volunteer participation with St. Vincent de Paul, with the Cedar Valley Interfaith Organization, to name a couple that come off the top of my head, that are directly community involved and community related. And I feel that if you have the opportunity and also can offer some things to the community from your experience and skills, that certainly serving, offering the opportunity to serve is a civic duty. My reason for wanting to be on the library board specifically, this is the second time I've applied, is that the role that libraries have played in my life as a very young child. I was strongly encouraged, that is, drugged by the hand to library in a adjoining suburb town of the village I grew up in Ohio, by my mother, to get a library card. And after being able to experience the libraries at a very young age, and also having an appreciation as I grew a little bit older, with my parents, their experience of not necessarily always being able to have a library card because of their race. that I appreciated it even more. And then, of course, many years ago, when I was making applications to colleges, it doesn't come up as much now, but of course the library is at that time in the 60s was a feature of the campus, and a lot of information was provided, and I learned to appreciate the library. Another thing that comes to mind at one of the colleges I attended as an undergrad, working in the library was an enjoyable experience for me. I was able to do that for a semester, and worked in the binding department, which I didn't even consider a part of a library. So to not run on too long, does that cover the kinds of areas, Councilman Dara, that you were referring to?
Yep, very good. It just seemed to me you were applying to get on the board for the right reasons. You see the value that the library brings to quality of life in the community and wanting to participate. So thanks for stepping up.
Yes, and I had the opportunity to talk with Mr. Green last week for about 20 minutes, just asking some follow-on questions. And like Councilmember Dara, I was very impressed with your servant's heart, your desire to make a difference in your community, and that's the kind of civic spirit that I hope will be contagious with other residents, that they'll see a desire to serve and to offer their own experiences in order to work with other boards and commission members and make a difference for our community. So thanks again. Do we have any final questions from council? Okay. Then, Mr. Green, thank you very much. You can watch the proceedings tonight at 7 o'clock. We'll be voting on your confirmation. And with that, thanks again.
Are there any mail-in ballots on that?
You're okay. You're okay. Thank you, sir. So our next item tonight is the Great American Rail Trail, a discussion on that, and this comes as a result of a council referral request to find out more about the rail trail, and Cedar Falls is part in that. So with that, I believe we have our Tourism and Visitors Director, Kim Manning. Yes, hello, Kim. So she'll start us off tonight. Go ahead, Kim.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. Okay, I was hearing a little echoing. Yes, I have Chris Stevie with me as well. Chris is the staff liaison for the Cedar Falls Bicycle Pedestrian Committee. And as you said, we've been asked to share about the Great American Rail Trail. We're just thrilled to be on the route. And the reason that the two of us are presenting is because we have quite a lot to do with trail promotions throughout the city, and because of the council referral on August 17th. I'm going to put a PowerPoint up here for you all to see, hopefully. I need to be able to share my screen, please.
You should be, Kim.
Okay, there we go.
Yep, we can see it fine.
Okay. You can, because I am not. Okay, there we go. Mm-hmm. All right. Oh, I need to do the one that is running the slideshow. Oh dear. I'm having a little difficulty with my screen.
I can run it if Kim wants.
Well, I've got two screens going, so I'm not sure.
If you just share your screen again and choose another application.
Yeah, so Kim, if you unshare your screen, it should give the option to reshare, but on a different screen. So you can give.
Okay, I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm not seeing any of those options
Okay.
here. Oh, there. Okay. You share. How's that? Well, I'm supposed to unshare, stop share. Okay, there we go. And then reshare again.
Correct, but just share the other screen this time.
Okay. Well, we've got good things to tell you. I'm wasting our time.
Oh, no, it's just fine. It's what keeps council meetings exciting. There you go. Perfect.
Okay, so now what are we seeing?
Yep, we're seeing the correct
That's
screen now.
perfect.
Are you seeing? Okay. I'm so sorry. Trails promotion. It
Yep.
should be running from the beginning. I'm trying to pick it up in flat. Okay.
Sometimes you can hit the left arrow on your keyboard too, and it'll go back one.
Okay, now it's doing it. Okay. Hallelujah. I'm so sorry. Thank you. Okay, we're ready to roll. Okay. The Tourism Bureau has been a longtime supporter of the trails, and we promote the trails all the time. We recognize the Cedar Valley Trail System as an outstanding attraction that could draw visitors to the area, so we've consistently worked to build awareness of Cedar Falls as an excellent cycling destination. We routinely advertise in publications like Minnesota Trails, Silent Sport, Bike Iowa, and Have Fun Biking. And we attend shows like the Iowa Bicycle Expo in Des Moines. We go to Communopia in Madison and the Midwest Outdoor Expo in Minneapolis. We've achieved success in this area as we are now viewed as one of Iowa's, indeed, the Midwest's most outstanding bicycling destinations. We see more and more visitors coming to the area to enjoy the trails and our shops, restaurants, breweries, and hotels. We estimate that 17% of trail users are from outside of the county. This means they bring an estimated $2.1 million in direct spending to the area every year. We also provide support to the Cedar Trails Partnership. Because the trails cover multiple jurisdictions, it's helpful to provide one public point of contact so donors, condition alerts, and other announcements can be sent to the appropriate jurisdiction. The partnership provides advocacy for the development of trails, fundraisers for maintenance and repair projects, funds enhancements through a grant program, and provides communications about trail etiquette and events. It also fields the Cedar Trail Patrol, which is a group of volunteers serving as trail ambassadors, providing directions, rudimentary first aid, and bicycle repair assistance on the trails. The partnership has purchased and installed counters at various locations along the trails and works with Intercog to collect and analyze the data. Trail usage throughout the pandemic has skyrocketed, with 64% increase in the Big Woods Lake area and a 102% increase in the Cedar Valley Nature Trail. We anticipate the Cedar Valley Nature trail traffic will continue to increase now that the Wolf Creek Bridge has been replaced. Thanks to the great work of the Blackhawk County Conservation Board, Preserve, the Cedar Valley Nature Trail, and the Cedar Trails Partnership, and many others. A number of other groups, including nonprofits, bike shop affiliate groups, gatherings of friends, and dozens of fun runs and rides organized as fundraisers utilize and support the trails. Chris will provide a quick overview of another city-sponsored committee, the Bicycle Pedestrian Committee, and their work and their relationship to the newly designated Great American Rail Trail. Chris?
Okay. So in 2009, the city was named the state's first bicycle-friendly community. So through that process, a bike plan was developed with input from dozens of cycling groups and residents. Mayor John Cruz in that same season assembled a bicycle and pedestrian advisory committee to help encourage implementation of the plan, to further encourage bicycling and also to educate riders about safe practices. The advisory committee has participated in a plan map update in 2015, most of which has been built out. Here in 2020, we are currently in the review process to update the plan map, yet again to continue improving our bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure and provide broader access across our community. As our infrastructure has grown and improved, Cedar Falls has established a strong bicycling culture with a myriad of cycling groups and teams including the Cedar Valley Cyclists, Spokeswomen, Cedar Valley Association for Soft Trails, Cedar Valley Bicycle Collective, and many more. On any given evening, multiple group rides are offered, including CVC WOW rides, Bike Tech single speed pint rides, Monday no drop gravel rides, and more. There are just as many running groups and events as well. Now that we've provided an overview of city-sponsored efforts to support trails and bicycling, let's get to the specifics of the Great American Rail Trail. Kim?
Sure. This project is the work of the Rail to Trails Conservancy, which is a national organization whose mission is to create a nationwide network of trails from former rail lines. These connect corridors to build healthier places for healthier people. The dream is to provide a nationwide trail on flat, wide, off-road paths using converted railways. The Great American Rail Trail will connect Washington State to Washington, D.C., with 3,700 miles of multi-use trails, 1,900 plus miles, which is 52% of the route, is already usable. Excuse me. Back in late 2018 and early 2019, as the Rails to Trails Conservancy was determining the route of the trail, I had several conversations with Kevin Bellinger, a planner with the organization. I explained the condition of our trails and the bicycling culture in our community. And because I've organized cooperative advertising campaigns with other Iowa trails destinations, I've connected him with a number of other trails organizations across the state. I also connected him with Intercause to obtain the most up-to-date information about the future of trail projects in our area.
So in Iowa, the Great American Rail Trail will total 445 miles, 55% of which is complete. An important number to remember because, I mean, 45% is the lofty goal that we have to fill in there. So established trails that make up the route include the Cedar Valley Nature Trail, Raccoon River Valley Trail, Wabash Trace Nature Trail, and High Trestle Trail. We are on the preferred route list in large part due to our proximity to the Cedar Valley Nature Trail, which is one of the nation's first rail trails, meaning it was converted from a railway to a recreational trail. The Cedar Valley Nature Trail has been designated as one of 12 gateway trails as the national route. In Cedar Falls, coming in from the west to the east, the Great American Rail Trail will use the Sargent Road Trail to the Cedar Prairie Trail to the Cedar Valley Lakes Trail. These trails have been around for a while and are logical additions to the national trail. Want to go to the next slide? However, the Cedar Valley Lakes Trail in Georgia State Park, that That has been a point of concern for the advisory committee because it is in disrepair and has been closed off for some time. The park manager, Cedar Trails Partnership, and others are currently fundraising to fully reconstruct this important segment. With help from the committee, we are publishing an article in the Fall Current that discusses this issue and the funding shortfall. George West State Park has some budget from broader funding sources, but will not be able to properly rebuild that segment without some additional help. Any donations from local community members and sponsors will be greatly appreciated. Now let's talk about broader funding for the Greater Trail. Just to be clear, most of the funding sources we're going to talk about here are not apportioned to benefit the Cedar Valley Lakes Trail that I just mentioned. But this is good information to consider how much work and tax dollars are going to support this transcontinental trail. By designating this nationwide trail, the Conservancy hopes to access just over $5.5 million in Iowa, $5.5 million in Iowa Recreational Trails Program and transportation alternatives set aside funds, as well as another $92 million in federal funds to complete the route. A lot of money. So the route was announced in May 2019, and due to the excitement the project has created, an additional $13 million in funding to help close gaps and improve existing sections was announced just 7 months later in December 2019. In addition, the Rails to Trails Conservancy indicated that nearly 100 miles of new trail along the route are expected to be completed in 2020. In Iowa, the list includes $375,000 in state grant funding to complete 4.4 miles of paved Iowa River Trail between Steamboat Rock and Eldora. Another $530,000 in state funding and $200,000 in regional funding to pave more than 3 miles of existing crushed stone Heart of Iowa Trail was secured, and just over $400,000 in state grant funding was secured to complete a 1 mile extension of the High Tressa Trail extension between Bowton and Woodward.
So our being a part of the Great American Rail Trail is an exciting development because it will help put us on the map on a national level. The Great American Rail Trail is being promoted by the Rails to Trails Conservancy via TrailLink, which is a robust website featuring communities and experiences along the trail. Deb Lewis works in our office and is an avid cyclist. She routinely submits updates about our trails and trail-related events to this website and many others to keep us top of mind amongst cycling enthusiasts. We were featured in the Rails to Trails National Newsletter in May 2019 with a story outlining the history of the Cedar Valley Nature Trail. As we do with other travel writers, we connected Corey Matson, the freelance writer who produced the article, with local contacts. In this particular case, we sent him to Roger White, Dick Dewater, and the Blackhawk County Conservation Office to provide historical details, etc., for the article. We also provided photos for the piece, as we oftentimes do with travel writers. We recently received a temporary signage to promote Trail Moments, which is an initiative that invites Americans to share how the use of the trail has impacted their lives during COVID-19. Millions of people, as you can imagine, have flocked to the outdoors seeking a safe place to play, commute, walk, bike, run, and explore. These stories will be featured in marketing efforts that will surely benefit our city and our region. The Rails to Trails Conservancy is also developing signage that will consistently identify the route across the country, which we hope to install soon. The American Discovery Trail is also a nationwide route that comes through the city, utilizing close to the same route in our area, at least. The American Hiking Society led the effort to establish this trail in 1989. It's a multi-purpose route and is intended to provide uninterrupted passage from the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean. They are currently updating the alignment of the route through Cedar Falls, and we plan to mark the northernmost point with a prairie pathway style sign explaining both national trail systems on one side of the sign and displaying an image created by Gary Kelly and Paco Rosick on the other side, which tells the story of why the image was created. It actually served as the cover of our 2012 visitor guide, and it's meant to illustrate the individual personalities of Cedar Falls and Waterloo and show how intertwined and collaborative we are. So there's lots of benefit to being on these two nationally designated trail systems.
We want to thank you for your attention and just want to open it for questions if we have time.
We do have a few minutes for questions. I've got one to start off with. Roughly how long would it take to travel across country on average? Is it a couple of weeks or a couple of months? Maybe Councilmember Cruz can answer that. You've done that too earlier. Go ahead, Kim.
I said, how fast do you bicycle, Mayor?
Okay.
That's a good question, and I don't have an answer. I don't know.
My buddy did it in a month.
Okay, a month.
So it's possible in a month. I have a couple questions. So I was the one who referred this for multiple reasons. One, to get the word out there more. This is a huge economic option for Cedar Falls. We know that with COVID-19, bicycling has skyrocketed. Outdoor recreational sports has skyrocketed. In fact, I believe Kim said that the trail use here even has skyrocketed since COVID-19. My couple questions would be that, are we truly ready for the Great American Rail Trail, making sure that we can divert people from the trail to stay and spend money in Cedar Falls? I really want to make sure that, if possible, we focus on, over the next couple years, creating that plan. And I'm not saying we're not. I just would love to know what's going on with that, because I know, and I believe Chris mentioned it, the trail between George Wythe and Pfeiffer, which could get people off of the Great American Rail Trail to Cedar Falls and downtown, that part's closed right now, correct? So I guess, are there plans, or is there anything in the work, like, for what are we doing to prep? What are we going to do to get people here to make Cedar Falls the destination where they want to stay the night and spend time here?
You're speaking my language. The Trails Partnership a couple of years ago installed some signage throughout the trails directing riders to the downtown area and other to restrooms, other amenities to make riders more comfortable. It gives signage and an estimated amount of time between various attractions on the trail, so that will be helpful. But you're right, we do need to be thoughtful of what the experience will be like for our visitors, and we do want to encourage them to spend time. Chris, do you want to address the maintenance project through George Wythe Park?
Yeah, so I've been in contact with them at George Wythe and have discussed some of the funding shortfalls that they have. I understand they do have some funds that they'll do kind of a partial project to kind of complete that, but it won't be probably to the quality that we'll want it unless we have more funding than what they've got already.
Yeah, Lori Eberhardt is planning a temporary fix that she plans to start on this fall. But as Chris said, it really requires a total removal and making it 10 foot wide instead of the older, narrower style.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I'll note too, I read this weekend an article from a biking magazine. It was from a person who traveled cross country, and it was 15 things he wished he'd known before taking a cross country trip. And one of the items that wouldn't cost any money for the city is he said he wished he had known about general delivery at post offices before taking his trip, because what he would have done is he would have mailed himself the stuff that he needed halfway through the trip. He would have mailed it to a post office in a smaller town, because he said smaller towns, it's less likely for things to get lost. And I could see, boy, Cedar Falls would be a perfect spot for that because we're so close to the trail anyway at the post office. So as we look at maybe some unconventional or unique ways, things that Cedar Falls can do, it could really help us to be a big driver for getting people, as Councilmember Harding said, to stay overnight and to make this their way station halfway through their trip. So thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation, and also to Chris for the support on that. And I will now bring us over to our next item, which is,
Thanks, Jim.
oh, yes.
I was just thanking Ken.
Oh, okay. So next item is parking large vehicles and trailers on city streets. So that's a presentation from Mr. Rogers, our city attorney. So Mr. Rogers, go right ahead, sir.
Thanks, Mayor, Council. We're here tonight to discuss large vehicles and trailers on the streets. If memory serves, this is the third time in 4 years we've had this in front of us. And so for some of you, you've seen a lot of this before. For the newer members, you haven't. So hopefully we'll give you some information to base your decisions on. I want to cover briefly, before we go there, maybe I should mention, this is a referral. That's why we're here. This is not something that staff generated to come before you. The original referral was parking commercial trailers on city streets. And when we delved into that, we ran into a lot of difficulty because commercial trailer is now a defined term in the Iowa Code. And so when it came to enforcement, we ran into a roadblock in terms of how do you recognize a commercial trailer when you see it if they're not licensed as such, so you can't check the tags. And so what we're bringing before you for your consideration is a more inclusive proposed language and more enforceable proposed language. To start off with, I wanted to tell you about current city ordinances, how we regulate parking. To start with, of course, there are location restrictions, such as no parking on certain streets on certain days, not across crosswalks on the sidewalk, things like that. Also, we restrict certain streets and hours. Certain areas are restricted from parking. This is all vehicles, not just large vehicles or trailers. Not too close to fire hydrants or across fire lanes, too close to intersections, restrictions like that. Also, there are regulations with respect to loading and unloading certain areas of downtown and on College Hill. Those are already regulated. Those are for all vehicles. Also, the city already regulates by ordinance against street obstructions. Those would include any vehicle which, if you are obstructing the street overnight, you require a banner and a flashing amber light under certain circumstances. And also the ordinances state that you can't stand, which just means sitting, or park across any street in the city so as to unreasonably obstruct the street. So we attack obstruction that way. We also talk about allowing at least 10 feet of lane width past any vehicle parked in the street. So in that way, the city has already addressed parking in terms of obstruction of free travel. There are other parking restrictions in place already as well. You can't park there for the principal purpose of displaying your vehicle for sale. I'm talking about on the streets now, or basically doing repairs and so forth. Unless, of course, you have an emergency situation, you need to repair it. And also we have the ordinance about 48 hours. You'll recall that that was just passed a little over a year ago. The 48 hours had been in place for a long time, but it was modified to some extent to impose additional requirements on the 48 hours. Again, this applies to all vehicles. So the issue we're dealing with here is large vehicles and trailers. And the reason you may decide to regulate here is that the ordinances just mentioned don't quite catch every situation, especially with larger vehicles. And so a larger vehicle that's not constituting necessarily an obstruction would not be addressed. If there are 10 feet of free movement, current ordinances wouldn't address it. If it's parked for less than 48 hours, current ordinance would not reach the issue, or otherwise legally parked. So there is an area for regulation should council decide to act. So in determining whether council does decide to act here, some considerations that may be important to you would be, obviously, first and foremost, safety, because of the potential obstructions for motorists, bicyclists, and pedestrians trying to maneuver around and past large vehicles and large trailers on the streets. Also, if those vehicles are there, that takes away the availability of on-street parking for residents nearby, and neighborhood aesthetics. Some folks may object to such large vehicles on the streets. In fact, there are some neighborhoods in the city by restrictive covenant that don't allow them at all. We looked at other cities, updated this a little bit, and we looked into how other cities regulate this issue, and they do it in one of three ways. Either a description of the vehicle in terms of length and width, or towing capacity, or hauling capacity, or some combination of all those. Sometimes other cities impose a time limit, and that could include a total ban in certain areas such as residential. And I would say that there was not, in review of the other cities, there's not an overwhelming trend one way or another on those. I think each city kind of does it in their own way. And of course, I think every city included that regulate in this area. I don't mean to indicate that all cities do regulate in this area. Some don't directly, but there's always exceptions included, such as for loading and unloading. In terms of how other cities regulate, in a description of the vehicle, there's a laundry list of the types of vehicles that are regulated. I'd say if there's any majority of the way this issue is regulated to be a laundry list. Some have used the term commercial vehicle as a ban, and some use size descriptors, and those are on your screen you'll see the various ways in which the ranges of ways in which they regulate. So what's that, 6 or 7 feet in width, 18 to 20 feet in length. And weight descriptions, and you might recall Cedar Falls used to regulate in that fashion with a 1-ton weight, but it was not very clear what it was meant by that. But other cities have regulated weight descriptions up to 5 tons of freight capacity, or 1 ton or more truck licensed. Other cities still we're talking about their time limits. They vary between a ban, outright ban, or outright ban in certain areas, to allowing parking for up to 2 or 4 consecutive hours. Exceptions that cities have implemented, like we discussed, deliveries, loading, unloading, and then exceptions to an overall ban, such as non-residential zoning districts in a city. We've seen those. So, taking the types of regulation, if council decides to act in this area, it would be a list of the vehicles subject to the ban by type. So we would call out what it would be. Every type of vehicle that would be listed has a definition in the Iowa Code, so there's no question about what we're talking about there. It's already defined for us in the Iowa Code. So that gives us a certainty of description, so there's no question about that. No judgment call needed on what is commercial versus non-commercial. And no need for measurements such as a restriction on width or length or anything like that. A specific time limit is not recommended because there's already a 48-hour time limit for all vehicles. And a time limit such as 2 hours, I believe that those time limits are in place to allow loading and unloading or active use of the vehicle, but 2 hours may not cover every situation. If it's someone's moving or something like that, it's going to take a lot more than 2 or 4 hours. The exception recommended is, as just mentioned, actively loading and unloading or providing services nearby. Remember, I said some cities distinguish between zoning districts or limiting the ban to residential areas. In terms of an overall approach, we didn't think that was the best approach because many zoning districts have mixed uses. And of course, the enforcement authorities would have to have the zoning map with them at all times if we're going to pick and choose which zoning districts that we'd enforce this in. And I'd say generally it seems like the trend we're seeing is more towards mixed use zoning. And so that may not be a direction council wishes to follow. So you'll see here that this is a laundry list for the proposed language, and it'd be easier to tell you what's not covered maybe than to go through this whole list. And basically what you're talking about for a ban would be everything but cars, SUVs, pickups, and passenger vans. You'll notice as well that it applies to all trailers, not just certain kinds of trailers. All trailers would be banned under this section. So you have the laundry list. You have all the various vehicles and equipment. It includes, you'll notice, agricultural equipment, construction equipment. It also has a trailer. And we called out pickup or passenger van because technically pickup would have fallen under a light delivery truck. So we want to make it clear pickups weren't covered, as well as passenger vans. We didn't call out cars or SUVs because there's no potential conflict that a car or SUV would fall under any of those previous categories. The last sentence has to do with exceptions, and again, we're talking about actively loading or unloading, or actively engaged in providing authorized services or activities, and there you might come to mind somebody that's spraying your lawn, something like that. They're not really loading or unloading, but they're working on the irrigation system, or a plumber, electrician working nearby. And so that's a proposed language. If council does wish to regulate in this area, then that would just require a motion. We'd really appreciate clear direction on an ordinance if council wishes to move in this area, so that we can bring something back that you would consider and pass. And obviously, any ordinance would come back to you at a regular council meeting for consideration at 3 readings. So that's what I have so far. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Attorney Rogers. I'll open it up now. We have about a half hour before we move towards getting ready for a regular council meeting, so this is a great time for a broad discussion about this. I'll open it up. Anyone? Councilmember DeBeer, go ahead.
How widespread of a problem do we have in Cedar Falls regarding parked vehicles?
Personally, I haven't received any complaints ever. along these lines. I don't know if Director Olson has or Administrator Gaines has, but I personally am not aware of calls about this.
Okay, because if I read this right, basically no vehicle that has anything, any kind of a trailer, whether it be a trailer for snowmobiles or a trailer hauling bicycles,
Yes.
would be allowed to park anywhere in the city or in any of our city public lots. Is that right?
Streets or lots, yes. Even a pull-up behind camper, anything like that, that would be subject to this ban. Again, we're starting with the most inclusive for council to consider, talk about, decide if they want to regulate. Great question. Is there a problem? I mean, that has to be the first question if you want to act in this area.
Councilmember Harding.
I believe, I'm not sure, I don't remember who referred this, but I believe this spawned from a tractor trailer that likes to park somewhere in the city on the side of the road. So I don't know if it's more of a problem than that or if that was just kind of what brought this up. So my question was the same as Councilmember DeBurs. Where have we seen this issue the most? So that was answered. My other questions would be, is there a possibility of inadvertently making a problem for the citizens? Which, yes, because of the trailers, you just answered that. So then I guess my follow-up to that would be, can we start to make exceptions or just ban a tractor trailer from parking on the side?
Yes, you could. Either way.
So no
You
need.
could pick out certain kinds of trailers. The problem if we get down to trailers is the Iowa code doesn't differentiate in a way that we could check. And so it is very difficult to be inclusive enough without being over-inclusive in terms of trailers. So I think we'd have to be very, very specific if some trailers will be allowed and some will be banned.
So back to the commercial vehicle, you said that Iowa code doesn't specify what commercial vehicle is, or?
It does.
It does?
In terms of commercial vehicle or commercial motor vehicle, but there's no such term as commercial trailer. And they're not licensed as such. So for instance, this is what we ran into. An officer wants to enforce, say a ban's in place, wants to enforce it, sees a trailer. Sometimes you may be able to tell if it's a commercial trailer used for commercial purposes. Sometimes you can't, and you can't just run the plate and say, it's registered as a commercial trailer. Now we got something.
Yeah.
They're not licensed as such.
So that makes sense. So it seems like if we're going to make it to where we don't cause a lot of issues and we want to pursue this, we should look at the size, possibly making a size limit or something like that so that it's not little tiny trailers or anything. It's something that is obviously commercial.
And that's one of the ways, as we said, cities regulate in terms of size. So that's one possibility.
Councilmember DeBur.
Have we considered targeting wherever we do have problems, any changes for that particular area where there's a problem, instead of trying to do something citywide? But I know we've done it in some neighborhoods where neighbors have come in and said they have a particular problem, and we look at what they recommend for their particular neighborhood. I'd like to see us, rather than do a citywide ban, I guess, target certain areas where there is a problem and look at what solutions we can have for that particular targeted area.
That's something we could consider. I think it would have to be based upon maybe objective characteristics like narrow streets where it would really be a problem. My only fear in that approach is if you pick out certain areas, they're just going to go to another area and those people aren't happy. And let me just say, there's no perfect solution here. If council decides to regulate, there's no magic bullet that I've been able to think of. So is there a problem? And let's address that problem which we think exists.
Okay. Councilmember Cruz.
Yes, thank you. I'm the one who brought this forward because I've received a couple complaints in the city. They're ongoing complaints we've had for some time. And through the previous discussion, we zeroed in on the commercial usage to try to define, because the vehicles that appear to be the problem and the complaints from the neighborhood are commercially based usage. So in your description, you have commercial motor vehicle, commercial vehicle. The commercial trailer, if we list just those three things are being banned, it would take care of the obvious licensed commercial vehicles. The commercial trailer, and this would be Director Olson's input here, can we leave it as an objective interpretation by a police officer patrolling to say something is, you know, you got sheetrock dust all over it, or it's you know, piles of branches and twigs sticking out of it. It's definitely not recreational. And you list recreational vehicles here, because this goes back, this language goes back to the original, I think, 3 years ago, that just pretty much kills everything in the street except the three things you mentioned.
Right.
So in a sense, we're creating more enforcement problem by banning everything except cars, trucks, and vans. I'd rather try to, again, piecemeal or take baby steps and go that route. And Mr. Olson, if you'd want to comment on.
Well, yeah, we've had some internal discussions about what the bigger problems are, or maybe the most common complaints. And our thought process is, I think you're correct, a lot of it is more of the commercial type vehicles. And the state doesn't license vehicles as commercial vehicles. However, if we were to run the plate and it comes back to a company name, is that enough presumption to assume that it's a commercial vehicle? I would ask our attorney to comment on that, but I think that might be something that could be helpful. Or maybe we could define a commercial vehicle if the state doesn't. I'm not exactly sure what the state definition is, but there's discussions that we've had to kind of help us identify what might be a commercial trailer or what wouldn't be a commercial trailer.
Trailers are licensed on the basis of weight or displacement, size, and certain kinds of trailers. So they don't differentiate between, and they're not registered as such, between commercial and non-commercial uses. And council's free to do what it wants. But the problem with limited to commercial vehicles, that would then mean it's okay for construction equipment to be parked there, farm equipment, combines. I don't know if that's the line.
We don't have those problems right now, though.
Yeah, and maybe not. And I would say as well, most of this would be on a complaint-based enforcement. So I don't think officers have time, I know they don't have time to drive around looking for big vehicles on the streets.
Councilmember Harding.
I think if we're going to look at an ordinance, that we should possibly agree on some things to make exceptions to. I agree with Mr. Rogers that we should possibly look at a size ban. Size would be a good thing to look at, just because we know most commercial trailers, not all, well, a good many are larger. And then I agree about the farm equipment. We might as well go through the list possibly and narrow down what we really don't want to see on the streets. And again, it would be complaint based. So if someone has their tractor out on the street and they call, well, we have the ordinance, we don't have to bring it up in council again, go over it. Or if there is a problem with a trailer that's very large and commercial based being parked consistently. So I would be for going through and really trying to make the list thoroughly and presenting an ordinance.
Okay.
But in that regard, if we haven't ever, or Mr. Olson can comment, had a concern about a tractor in the street, and it's probably a one-off event where somebody's doing some grading on a lot or a property and then the tractor's gone, because I don't know too many people that keep a tractor in the city limits. But the problems that I've seen have been commercial trailers, commercial vehicles. I think one of the suggestions here is to avoid limits, length limits and measuring and that sort of thing, but we can do whatever. I mean, I'm open. But to do baby steps forward, eliminating.
If I see what you're saying, if you can't define a commercial trailer, we can define a commercial vehicle, but they say we can't define a commercial trailer. So how do you define a commercial trailer?
Commercial trailer is not defined in the state code. That doesn't mean we couldn't define it in some fashion with Mr. Olson's input as far as what he sees on the street. Is that something?
Could we put commercial trailer in the ordinance and then go on to further define what a commercial trailer is?
We could.
Would it have to be something as general as a commercial trailer is one that is registered to a company?
That could be part of it.
I don't know
Could be
how
part
else
of
you
it.
would.
Well,
the distinction.
I don't want to get into drafting on the fly here, but if council's wishes are to draft an ordinance along those lines, I mean, we could come back with something after careful research, see what other cities do, if that's the direction we want to do. If we want to limit the ban to commercial vehicles, commercial motor vehicles, and commercial trailers, certainly we can do that. And define, 2 of the 3 don't need definition, we'll just go by the Iowa Code definition. And the third, we'd have to come up with our own. Taking as much as we can the difficult problem that officers would have on the street trying to decide if, well, that's not really commercial, I just haul my lawnmower there to mow my mother's lawn. And, well, why does it say Kevin's lawn mowing service then? Well, that's just for fun. See, what if it's unmarked? So we'd have to come up with a definition that would cover the council's intent. What truly are we looking at as the problem here? Certainly a semi-tractor trailer, I think, would fall into that category if I'm hearing you right.
Right.
Wasn't that the picture that was sent? Was of a trek, what was the picture?
It was a
sent?
semi-trailer with John Deere equipment on it or other implements but to your point, Mr. Rogers, is that whatever we define for commercial trailer is better than nothing that we really have now.
Yes,
Because right now we have 48 hours and you got to move it 2,500 feet or something like that.
correct.
So whatever we do now is an improvement to cover a couple complaints that are ongoing. And if we need to come back in a year, we can come back in a year and further define something.
Just make it so that it has to be hooked to a personal vehicle, such as a pickup or a car or anything else. Because if it's hooked to something, then it should be able to sit there in front of their house because they're obviously going to use it. And it's obviously not a commercial vehicle, just make it hooked up, because I don't think people should leave their trailers, whether it be a recreational trailer or any of that stuff, sitting in the street for long periods of time. But if they're using it, it's hooked up to something, I don't think that should be a problem.
What if it's hooked up to a semi-truck?
A what?
What if it's hooked up to a semi-truck?
Then that would be a commercial vehicle, and that would be a little bit big. I said personal car or pickup or anything of that nature. I mean, it's pretty simple.
That would be the exclusion to the first 3.
What's that?
That'd be the exclusion to the first 3, where you got commercial motor vehicle, commercial vehicle, those are in the code. We define commercial trailer with the exception given to somebody that's actively using that trailer and attached to a vehicle. That seems to be, well, Mr. Olson, Director Olson, that seem helpful in enforcement? If it's attached to something?
Yeah, I mean, you could certainly write that, and if it's attached to something, we would leave it alone, but we still have the 48-hour ordinance
Right.
that would,
That doesn't go away.
yeah, that doesn't go away, so that's still there to assist.
That's an improvement of what we're using right now.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, go ahead, Councilor
Okay.
Dunn.
So my concern is, well, there's a few concerns. First, we just got done talking about this bike trail that's coming across the United States and coming through here. And I think about like some of the people I hang out with. So sometimes you have somebody who does construction or for some reason has a commercial type trailer. And I just hate the thought of a total ban of, what if somebody's coming and yet they have their sag wagon or whatever you want to call it, and they're going to stay overnight here. So we've put an ordinance in place where we don't even have any place in this town for them to park. I mean, I guess they could potentially park at their hotel, but I have that concern. Also, I have the concern that, I think about in this stressful time in our world, every once in a while, there might be somebody who needs to come home for the night, and maybe for whatever reason, maybe they got to get a kid somewhere or something. And so I think the problem that I see in my own neighborhood, it's the habitual people who park all the time. Is there a way that we could, if somebody has a problem we need to address, maybe we set a number of days that those people can park in a 365-day period, and if there's a a complaint? Is there a way to document, like, yes, this is a habitual person constantly parking here? I just think about my own self. Sometimes we roll back from camping, and for whatever reason, I don't know, something bad happens. Maybe there's a car that won't move in the driveway, you know, like all of a sudden it's broke down or something. So then you've got that stress level for families that, you know, they're not necessarily abusers of this, but we've created an ordinance where we've added stress. And I don't think that's what, I understand what people are saying, because I see people who constantly park the same trailer in the street, or I've seen, I think, the tractor trailer that I've, and it is dangerous, when, especially when little kids are biking and stuff like that. So I think I get the problem, but I don't want to add stress or discourage people when they do come from being able to enjoy our city if they were using a, quote, commercial trailer or a size or whatever we're saying. So that's my concern. Is there a way that we can stop the people that are kind of ruining it for everyone and not punish people who are legitimately just, you know, they need a place to park for a short time?
What you might be defining sounds like a recreational vehicle as opposed to a commercial, possibly?
Oh, well, if you take a construction trailer and you go on a big, huge bike ride and you throw a bunch of bikes in it or some snowmobiles, then all of a sudden your commercial trailer is a recreational trailer.
True.
So,
Which is
Right.
exactly the problem with the commercial
Right.
trailer.
Based off.
Councilmember Miller, go ahead.
I think you just outlined what the problem is there isn't a good way to only consider some things. And I think there's too much gray area or subjectivity for our officers to be out there if we, I mean, you don't want to put it, I don't love this. I voted against this when it first came up because it's so limiting, but I'm actually considering it. I mean, if it's going to be on a complaint basis, then this takes care of all of the people that are squeezing in the loopholes or whatnot. I mean, the issue we're talking about is somebody parking a semi-trailer on a residential street. Nobody wants to see that. But how do you have a code that covers it, but doesn't cover something else? So I don't know which way to go with this. I mean, if Daryl, if what you're talking about with defining commercial works, I guess I would rather see it than this, but I'm also, I mean, how much time, this is the third time in 4 years we've been back at this? So it's
Yeah, I mean,
continuing to happen, and
But that's why I want to take baby steps in doing this, you know. and
I would
not-
say,
not go
to address your issue, totally agree. You know, the things that you're talking about where it would be problematic, and Councilmember Dunn's statements, most of those can go in the driveway and avoid the problem, except under emergency situations. Most of them can go in the driveway and avoid the problem. It's the ones that can't go in the driveway to avoid the problem are really the problem, aren't they? You generally can't get your semi-truck and tractor back into the driveway. I mean, maybe they could, but nobody else is going to be leaving that place for a while. So when you're considering this, there is an alternative for these folks, and it's put them in the driveway. Now, that's not advocating. That's just pointing something out.
Can you say that again, Mr.?
If people are concerned about short-term folks with recreational vehicles or small trailers, to avoid the problem, just back it into the driveway, and you're golden. And you won't get a complaint that way. But it would catch the folks that really can't do that. They got a great big outfit truck and tractor out there or other equipment that's not really feasible. Well, that's exactly the ones that maybe aren't the best to be on the streets in the first place, parked.
Mr. Mayor?
What,
Yes, Councilmember Darrett?
I'm trying to recall back when this last came up, and I think my recollection of a lot of the problem was the extended time. You know, the neighborhood where a guy had his own construction company and he parked his truck out front every day for months. And then we encouraged him to park somewhere else, so he parked 3 houses down. I mean, it's those kinds of obvious things. To me, it's a repeat offender, or if one night somebody's parked a semi, their family lives here and they're driving cross country and they park, yeah, it's not the best thing, but it was just one instance, you know. So to me, it's more the recurring nature of these things. Maybe identifying vehicles that are egregious, just obviously shouldn't be there. But then, as far as some of these others, it's not having somebody park one place one night and then the next day park somewhere else to avoid that. And to me, it's just the ongoing nature of it that was the biggest problem. So
Yeah.
I'd rather identify a period of time that it's parked illegal or whatever, as opposed to what type it is.
I don't know what our actual practice is in terms of the 48-hour thing. Do we give them a warning first? Assuming we get a complaint, do we give them a warning first?
Well, when we receive a complaint, we chalk the tire. We do believe the resident that it's been there for 48, but for court purposes, we have to chalk the tire or do something that we know the vehicle hasn't been moved in 48 hours. Now, typically, we'll try to contact an owner and let them know, then they'll have an opportunity to move it, but many times we can't get a hold of an owner. So then we wait that 48, and then we'll cite them. Then we wait another day or two, and if nothing is resolved and we can't get a hold of them, we'll consider towing it.
So this is probably an unfair question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So let's say council decides to pass something in this mix, and a complaint is made, first-time complaint. How do you think law enforcement would handle that?
Well, depending upon
It's a ban, so it's a total
It's a ban. Okay, well, there would have to be a whole lot of education because people wouldn't be aware. And if people truly aren't, if it's a minor infraction like this and people truly aren't aware, then we prefer to educate and let them know. We do have a few what we call warning books. So if we have scenarios like this, you can enter that address and that vehicle in that warning book, and if it comes up again, you know specifically the date and time and person you contacted previously. So there's no issue as to whether they were aware of the ordinance or not.
Okay, and just to keep on time budget, if we want to stay on time, we've got about 10 minutes remaining. Looks like we'll move into more of a motion phase soon. I would like to open it up to public comment. Does anyone from public wish to speak on this item? Okay, Ms. Smith, come forward. And name and address for the record, please.
Sure. Whitney Smith, Neola Street, Cedar Falls. Just generating ideas as I'm sitting there listening. A couple ideas. When people are having construction work done on their home or anything, I mean, I've seen trailers in my neighborhood quite a bit. We had one in our yard. What if the city issues a permit to the contractor and that permit is good for certain hours during the day and the vehicle must be moved, or you guys can choose however that works, but possibly one. What if it's also defined by the size of the street, not the size of the vehicle? So some streets are extremely narrow. It is just not a good idea. And also, I know Waterloo has a nuisance ordinance so on properties. So if somebody's continually complaining about somebody's property, eventually, I think they tax it or something, or there's a fee, and then if they don't pay it, I think the house can be taken, but or maybe the vehicle can be taken. But just as a way to, so with the nuisance thing, that's just specifically targeting those repeat offenders. Just an idea. I don't have any problems with this, but just generating ideas. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Smith. Councilmember Harding, did you have something to add?
We can,
Okay.
more of a motion thing, so we can keep going with public
All right.
comment.
Well, yes, Councilmember Cruz?
Okay, I guess unless there's other comments, I'd like to go with a motion
Okay.
to preliminary start narrowing this down. As several of us said, this is too inclusive, so I'd like to make a motion to write in the city language banning commercial motor vehicle, commercial vehicle, commercial trailer, and attempt to write a definition for us on commercial trailer, and then develop a warning system if there's, as Mr. Olson, Director Olson mentioned, it sounded like you have books, like a certain type of yellow ticket, red ticket for a warning as opposed to an actual citation?
Well, it's a booklet that we keep at the public safety headquarters where the officer would call in and we record it there.
Keep
So-
track of, I see,
Yeah.
okay. So, given that warning system's in place, that's what I'd like to propose, something along that lines.
Okay, so do I understand right that this proposed, this motion would be to develop an ordinance that would ban commercial vehicles and ban commercial trailers with writing the definitions of what those would be, and then developing a warning book for,
That's already there.
okay,
apparently.
so you just scratch that part. So it'd be ban commercial vehicles and ban commercial
motor
trailers after writing the definitions, and that would be an ordinance coming back to council for approval. So, does everybody get that? So motioned. Is there a second for it?
I'll second.
It's been motioned and seconded. Any further council discussion on it?
One quick question. As Ms. Smith said, would this be possible to affect someone that was having work done on their house where the trailer was parked there during the day? We're assuming they're not going to leave it parked overnight.
Sometimes they do, though.
So the question would be, would we have to address that in the ordinance? Is it possible to give a permit? And then the other one would be moving. If someone's moving and parks their big,
I guess,
Mr. Mayor,
is that unloading and loading?
Yes.
with regard to the permits, I think that's easy enough. If a building permit's issued, we can associate that with the trailer that would be parked out in front of that. And then
Okay.
To the question with regard to big moving semis, those type of things, again, in the ordinance, it was actively being used, loaded or unloaded, so.
So there wouldn't necessarily be a need to amend this motion then?
So, yeah, we can basically accommodate what I was just asking within this motion. That's what I was making sure of.
okay.
Okay.
Do you want to
Already in
keep the
the code, though?
exceptions?
do we have anything in the code already that just addresses
No.
actively constructing a house and?
Well, yes, but it doesn't address the movers or the plumber
Okay.
working.
Well, this last sentence here where it says, person actively engaged in providing authorized services or conducting authorized activities on or adjacent nearby premises, include that sentence if it's not already in our city code?
So you'd retain that last sentence, along with
Yeah.
what you said already?
That covers what,
Yeah, that covers the other issues.
Yeah.
I guess for myself, being a contractor, I'm not really in favor of another permit to park a trailer at somebody's house, but, I mean, there's several issues that come up there. For me, sometimes I do leave a trailer in front of somebody's house because the street's packed and I don't know if I'm gonna have a parking spot the next day. So you run into all sorts of little particulars out there in terms of parking. So I guess to me, that last sentence covers the movers, the loading and unloading, and working on somebody's house.
So I would have, if somebody prosecuted a case against Councilmember Miller, and he did a 2-day job at somebody's house, and he left the trailer there overnight, till the job's finished, I would consider him still actively working at that house.
sure.
And it
Makes sense.
things come up. So
Right.
if I pull that permit and it's only for 2 days and then it takes an extra day, then I'm in violation and I got to go get another permit. I mean, there's all sorts of particulars that
Yeah.
in that.
I didn't mean get an extra permit. I just meant if there was some way we could associate it with the permit of the work that they were already doing.
And that's what I meant,
Gotcha.
is when you pull your permit for XYZ Street, and you would be actively working at that location.
That's a way
so
that you can verify it.
Yeah.
That's the patrolling officers can pull it up easy enough, I'm assuming.
Sure.
That's what I meant, yeah. Not get an extra one.
Okay. So it's been motioned and seconded to draft an ordinance that would ban commercial vehicles and commercial trailers while writing the definition.
And commercial motor vehicles, the other words here.
Commercial motor vehicles, okay.
Those are the great big ones.
Yeah, okay.
All right, so motion and seconded. Any final discussion? Then it's just a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, so it's like 6 aye, 1 nay. So we can proceed forward with that. And with that, that was our final item tonight. So thank
Thank
you,
you.
Attorney Rogers. And we will adjourn until 7 o'clock. Thank you very much.